The quiet before the storm. Captain Marcus Chen stood on the observation deck of the New Frontier Colony Administration building, watching the twin suns of Kepler 440b paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold. The morning ritual had become sacred to him over the past 5 years. Coffee in one hand, daily reports in the other. He surveyed the thriving settlement that had become home to 8,000 souls who had traveled 43 light years to build something new. The colony stretched across a fertile valley between towering crystal formations that caught and reflected the sunlight like natural prisms. These weren't just beautiful landmarks, but had become the foundation of their mining operations. The crystals contained rare elements that made the dangerous journey from Earth worthwhile. What the colonists didn't know yet was that these same formations would soon save their lives. Dr. Elena Vasquez walked briskly toward the science complex, her mind already focused on the day's research. She had spent the last 3 years studying the unique properties of the local crystal formations, and her latest discoveries were extraordinary. The crystals didn't just store energy like batteries. They could amplify and redirect it in ways that defied conventional physics. Her research notes were filled with theories about practical applications, though she never imagined those applications would involve warfare in the engineering district. Chief Engineer Tom Walsh was already at work before dawn, as usual. The colony's infrastructure required constant maintenance, and Tom took pride in keeping everything running smoothly. He had a gift for improvisation that had saved the colony countless times when supply ships were delayed or equipment failed. His workshop was a maze of salvaged parts, modified tools, and half-finished projects that somehow always came together when needed most. The colonists went about their morning routines with the comfortable rhythm of people who had found their place in the universe. Children walked to school past the hydroponics farms where their parents grew food for the entire settlement. Miners prepared for another day, extracting precious crystals from the formations that dominated the landscape. Scientists in the research facilities worked on projects that would benefit not just New Frontier, but all of humanity's expanding presence in the galaxy. Lieutenant Sarah Kim finished her morning patrol in one of the colony's 3 atmospheric fighters. Small craft designed for planetary defense, but never expected to face anything more dangerous than the occasional asteroid or space debris. She was young but skilled, one of the few colonists with actual military training beyond Marcus's Marine background. Her reports always came back clean, the surrounding space peaceful and empty. At the mining operations center, Old Pete supervised the extraction crews with the wisdom of someone who had been working with explosives and heavy machinery for 40 years. He had come to New Frontier not for adventure, but for the simple satisfaction of honest work in a place where a man's efforts meant something. His knowledge of mining techniques and controlled explosions was encyclopedic, earned through decades of experience on Earth and 3 other colony worlds. The morning proceeded like thousands of others before it. The communication center received routine messages from Earth and other colonies. The medical facility treated minor injuries and conducted regular health screenings, and the small security force dealt with nothing more serious than a dispute between neighbors over property lines. New Frontier had become exactly what its founders had envisioned, a peaceful, prosperous community where humans could build something lasting among the stars. Marcus finished his coffee and was reviewing the quarterly production reports when his communicator buzzed with an urgent message from the long-range sensor station. The voice belonged to Technician Rodriguez, a steady man who never called unless something was seriously wrong. "Captain Chen, you need to see this immediately. I'm detecting multiple large objects approaching our system. They're moving too fast to be commercial vessels and too coordinated to be anything natural. Marcus felt his old marine instincts kick in, the peaceful morning suddenly forgotten. He ran through the colony's pathways toward the sensor station, his mind already calculating possibilities. The colony had no enemies that he knew of, no reason to expect trouble. Their location was remote enough that they rarely saw unauthorized ships, and their defensive capabilities were minimal by design. The sensor station was a small building filled with equipment that monitored everything within a 50 light-year radius. Rodriguez was hunched over his instruments, his face pale as he tracked the incoming objects. The display showed 12 massive signatures moving in perfect formation directly toward Kepler-4 for 2b. How long until they reach us? Marcus asked, studying the readings with growing alarm. 18 hours, maybe less if they increase speed, Rodriguez replied. Captain, these aren't cargo haulers or research vessels. These are warships, and they're heading straight for us. Marcus stared at the display, his mind racing through possibilities. New Frontier had been carefully chosen for its isolation and strategic insignificance. They had no military installations, no weapons research, nothing that should attract hostile attention, yet 12 warships were approaching their peaceful colony with obvious intent. He activated the colony-wide communication system and called for an emergency meeting of all department heads. Within 30 minutes, the colony's leadership had assembled in the administration building's conference room. The faces around the table reflected the same confusion and growing fear that Marcus felt. Dr. Vasquez was the first to speak after. Marcus explained the situation. Could this be some kind of mistake? Maybe they're not coming for us specifically. 12 warships don't travel in formation by accident, Marcus replied grimly. Someone has targeted us, and we need to figure out why and how to respond. Chief Engineer Walsh studied the sensor data on his tablet, his expression thoughtful. These ships are using technology I don't recognize. The energy signatures are consistent with weapon systems far beyond anything we have. Lieutenant Kim had been running calculations on her own device. If these are hostile forces, our 3 atmospheric fighters won't last 10 minutes against ships this size. We need to think about evacuation procedures. Evacuation to where? Old Pete asked, from his corner of the room. Our transport ships can't carry 8,000 people, and even if they could, those warships would catch us before we reached the edge of the system. The room fell silent as the reality of their situation sank in. New Frontier was home to 8,000 civilians who had come to build new lives, not to fight wars. They had minimal defenses, no military training for the general population, and no way to escape if these unknown warships proved hostile. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. 8,000 people were counting on him to find a solution to an impossible problem. His marine training had taught him to assess resources and terrain, to find advantages where others saw only obstacles. He looked around the room at the faces of people who had become his family over the past 5 years. We're not running, he said finally. This is our home, and we're going to defend it. We may not have military weapons, but we have something else. We have knowledge of this planet, industrial equipment that can be modified, and the determination to protect what we've built. The next 18 hours would test every skill, every resource, and every ounce of courage that the colonists possessed. They had no way of knowing that they were about to face the hegemony, a militaristic alliance that had conquered dozens of worlds through overwhelming force and technological superiority. The hegemony's Admiral Krex had chosen New Frontier as a test target, expecting to demonstrate his fleet's new weapons against defenseless humans. What Admiral Krex didn't understand was that humans had not survived and thrived across the galaxy by being defenseless. They had done so by adapting, by finding ways to turn disadvantages into advantages, and by refusing to surrender even when facing impossible odds. The peaceful colonists of New Frontier were about to remind the galaxy why humanity had earned its reputation as the most dangerous species to underestimate. The twin suns set behind the crystal formations as the colony prepared for the fight of their lives. Tomorrow would bring either victory or destruction, but it would also prove once again that humanity's greatest strength was not in their weapons or their technology, but in their refusal to give up when everything they loved was at stake. Desperate preparations, the colony transformed overnight from a peaceful settlement into a hive of desperate activity. Marcus had divided the population into teams based on their skills and experience, turning teachers into ammunition loaders, farmers into communications operators, and shopkeepers into lookouts. Everyone had a role to play in the defense of their home. Dr. Vasquez worked feverishly in her laboratory, driven by a sudden understanding of how her crystal research could be weaponized. The formations that had seemed like mere geological curiosities were actually sophisticated energy manipulation systems. She had discovered that the crystals could absorb, store, and redirect energy with an efficiency that bordered on the miraculous. "Tom, you need to see this," she called to Chief Engineer Walsh, who was busy converting mining equipment into makeshift weapons. She led him to a small crystal formation in her lab and activated a low-power laser pointer. The beam entered the crystal and emerged as a focused beam 10 times more powerful than the original. Walsh whistled in appreciation. "That's not just amplification, that's transformation. Alina, if we can scale this up using the large formations around the colony, we might have a chance." The engineering teams worked through the night, connecting the natural crystal formations to the colony's power grid. They used mining cables, industrial generators, and every piece of electrical equipment they could find. The idea was simple in concept, but challenging in execution. Turn the entire valley into a massive weapon system powered by the crystals. Unique properties. Old Pete became the coordinator for the mining crews, who were busy placing explosive charges throughout the colony's defensive perimeter. These weren't random explosions, but carefully calculated detonations, designed to create kill zones and channel attacking forces into predetermined areas. Pete's decades of experience with controlled explosions made him uniquely qualified to turn the colony's mining expertise into military advantage. "We're not trying to win a fair fight," Pete explained to the volunteer militia as they helped position the charges. "We're trying to make them pay such a high price that they'll think twice about tangling with humans again." Lieutenant Kim worked with the colony's small air wing, modifying their 3 atmospheric fighters for combat. The changes were improvised, but effective. Mining lasers replaced navigation sensors. Industrial cutting torches were mounted as weapons, and the cargo compartments were loaded with explosive charges that could be dropped on enemy positions. The communication center became the colony's nerve center, with technician Rodriguez coordinating information flow between all the defensive teams. His sensors tracked the approaching fleet, while his communications equipment kept the scattered defensive positions in contact with each other. Marcus moved between the different teams, offering encouragement and making tactical decisions. His marine training had taught him to think like the enemy, to anticipate their moves and prepare counters. The approaching fleet would expect to find a defenseless colony, not a coordinated defensive network powered by crystalline technology they had never encountered. As dawn approached, the alien fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. The lead ship was massive, a kilometer-long dreadnought bristling with weapons and carrying the flag of Admiral Krex. The Admiral stood on his bridge, studying the sensor readings of the small human colony with satisfaction. Insignificant, he declared to his staff officers. A few thousand primitives with basic technology. This will be over in minutes. Admiral Krex was a veteran of 23 conquest campaigns, a career built on the systematic destruction of lesser species who dared to resist the hegemony's expansion. He had chosen New Frontier specifically because it appeared to be a soft target, a place where he could test his new weapons without risking significant casualties to his own forces. The hegemony fleet consisted of 12 warships, each one capable of reducing a planet's surface to molten rock. They carried weapons that could shatter mountains, shields that could deflect nuclear explosions, and troops equipped with armor that made them nearly invulnerable to conventional weapons. Against a small human colony, they represented overwhelming force. Back on the planet's surface, the colonists watched the alien ships assume attack positions in orbit above them. The ships were beautiful in their own way, sleek and deadly, but they represented everything the colonists had left Earth to escape: the domination of the weak by the strong, the triumph of force over reason. Dr. Vasquez made final adjustments to her crystal array, connecting the last of the power cables to the natural formations around the colony. The system was untested and potentially dangerous, but it represented their best hope of evening the odds against the superior alien technology. All crystal arrays are online and ready, she reported to Marcus over the communication system. The formations are charged and stable. We're as ready as we're going to be. Chief Engineer Walsh had completed his modifications to the mining equipment, turning excavators into mobile gun platforms and industrial lasers into anti-aircraft weapons. The colony's workshops had become armories, producing ammunition and spare parts for equipment that had never been designed for warfare. Old Pete's mining crews had finished placing their explosive charges, creating a network of controlled detonations that could be triggered individually or in sequence. The colony's peaceful streets now concealed enough explosive power to reshape the landscape, all hidden beneath the normal appearance of daily life. Lieutenant Kim and her pilots performed final checks on their modified fighters, knowing that they would be facing impossible odds in the sky. Their small ships were fast and maneuverable, but they were going up against warships with weapons that could vaporize them in seconds. As the alien fleet completed its deployment, Admiral Krex opened a communication channel to the colony below. His image appeared on screens throughout New Frontier, showing a tall, imposing figure in ornate military uniform. His species was humanoid but clearly alien, with features that spoke of a culture built on conquest and dominance. "Humans of New Frontier," Admiral Krex announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. "I am Admiral Krex of the Hegemony Fleet. You are hereby ordered to surrender unconditionally. You have 1 hour to comply, or we will demonstrate the consequences of defiance." The communication ended, leaving the colonists to contemplate their choice. They could surrender and hope for mercy from their conquerors, or they could fight against impossible odds to defend their home. For the people of New Frontier, there was really no choice at all. Marcus activated the colony-wide communication. System 1, final time. "Citizens of New Frontier, you've heard their demands. We've spent the last 18 hours preparing for this moment. We may be outnumbered and outgunned, but we have something they don't understand. We have each other, we have our home, and we have the refusal to surrender what we've built with our own hands. The hour passed quickly as the colonists made their final preparations. Families said goodbye, volunteers checked their equipment. One last time, and the entire colony held its breath as the deadline approached. They had transformed their peaceful settlement into a fortress powered by crystalline technology and human determination. When the hour expired, Admiral Krex received the colony's response. It came not in words but in actions, as the crystal formations around New Frontier began to glow with stored energy and the colonists took their positions for the fight of their lives. The Admiral smiled coldly as he gave the order to begin the attack. In his experience, resistance always crumbled quickly when faced with overwhelming force. He had no way of knowing that he was about to learn why humans had become known throughout the galaxy as the species that fought hardest when cornered. The first energy beams lanced down from the alien ships, targeting what appeared to be the colony's primary power stations. The beams struck the crystal formations with devastating force, expecting to cripple the humans' infrastructure in the opening moments of the battle. Instead, the crystals absorbed the energy and redirected it back toward the fleet with 10 times the original power. The redirected beams struck the nearest hegemony cruiser, overloading its shields and causing massive damage to its hull. The ship's crew scrambled to understand what had happened as their supposedly invulnerable vessel began venting atmosphere into space. Admiral Krex stared at his tactical display in disbelief. "What just happened?" "Report. Sir, their defensive systems somehow reflected our weapons back at us," his tactical officer replied, his voice shaking. "I've never seen anything like it." The battle for New Frontier had begun, and the humans had drawn first blood. The colonists' desperate preparations were about to be tested against an enemy that had never faced defeat, led by an admiral who was about to learn that humans were far more dangerous than he had ever imagined.